The Monkey's Paw by W. Jacobs, Part 3. Sounds like the Arabian Nights, said Mrs. White as she rose and began to set the supper table. Don't you think you might wish for 4 pairs of hands for me? Her husband drew the talisman from his pocket, and all 3 burst into laughter as the sergeant major, with a look of alarm on his face, caught him by the arm. If you must wish, he said gruffly, wish for something sensible. Mr. White dropped it back in his pocket, and placing chairs, motioned his friend to the table. In the business of supper, the talisman was partly forgotten, and afterwards the 3 sat listening enthralled to a second installment of the soldier's adventures in India. If the tale about the monkey's paw is not more truthful than those he has been telling us, said Herbert, as the door closed behind their guest, just in time to catch the last train, we shouldn't make much of it. Did you give him anything for it? Inquired Mrs. White, asking her husband. A trifle, said he. He didn't want it, but I made him take it. Mr. White took the paw from his pocket and eyed it dubiously. I don't know what to wish for, and that's a fact, he said slowly. It seems to me that I've got all I want. Well, wish for 200 pounds, said Herbert. That'll just do it. His father smiled and held up the talisman, as his son, with a solemn face, winked at his mother, sat down at the piano, and struck a few impressive chords. I wish for 200 pounds, said the old man distinctly. A fine crash from the piano greeted his words, interrupted by a shuddering cry from the old man. His wife and son ran towards him. It moved, he cried, with a glance of disgust at the object as it lay on the floor. As I wished, it twisted in my hands like a snake. Well, I don't see the money, said his son as he picked it up and placed it on the table, and I bet I never shall. It must have been in your mind, said his wife, regarding him anxiously. He shook his head. Never mind, though. There's no harm done, but it gave me a shock just the same. They sat down by the fire again. Outside, the wind was higher than ever. The old man started nervously at the sound of a door banging upstairs. A silence, unusual and depressing, settled on all 3, which lasted until the old couple rose to retire to bed. I expect you'll find the cash tied up in a big bag in the middle of your bed, said Herbert as he bade them good night. He sat alone in the darkness, staring into the fire, seeing demonic faces. They became so vivid that he reached onto the table next to the chair, looking for some water to extinguish the fire. He felt the monkey's paw in his hands, dropped it, and wiped his hand on his coat. With that, Herbert went upstairs and retired to bed also. Please tune in to Part 4 of The Monkey's Paw.